OBE, who will speak all about the future of JLGB and his own story. But before all of that, our special guest for tonight. Richard Herring is an English stand-up comedian and writer, originally famous for being part of the double act Lee and Herring, and of course today for his brilliant podcast, Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre Podcast. Originally born in Yorkshire, Richard grew up in Cheddar, Somerset as the youngest child of 2 teachers. In fact, while attending school, his father was his headmaster. It was during this time that Richard started writing comedy, and he carried this on throughout his years at St Catherine's College, Oxford University. It was there that Richard first met Stuart Lee, with whom he would form a double act as they started working on a range of television, radio and stage shows, with their big break coming with Fist of Fun and then This Morning with Richard Not Judy. After setting out on his own, script writing for shows like Al Murray's Time Gentlemen Please, Richard has continued his rise to become the British Theatre Guide's leading hidden masters of modern British comedy. He continues his stand-up, sketch and Edinburgh Fringe shows, and of course, his award-winning podcast. An incredibly busy man, he's raising 2 children alongside his wife, writer and comedian Katie Wilkins, as well as being a patron of Scope and campaigner for International Women's Day. And he has also been announced as starring in the next series of Taskmaster in October. We are so grateful and so excited that he is able to join us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's very special guest, Richard Herring. Good evening, Richard.
Hello, love to be here. Thanks for having me.
How's lockdown been for you and your family? Are you all positive?
There's been lots of positives. It's been quite difficult. I've got 2 young kids and obviously suddenly having to look after them all the time. It was quite a challenge, and become the teacher of the older one. Without you suddenly realise how much help you get from in-laws and babysitters and that sort of thing. But on the whole, it's been okay. It's nice to be easing our way out, I have to say, and going back to the world. And we went to a safari park yesterday, and we went on holiday last week, so it's to Sussex. So that's nice. So I think with all these things, becoming a parent, you appreciate all the free time you had before and how you didn't really understand how lucky you were. So I think the lockdown's a little taste of how parenting is, unless you're parenting during lockdown as well, in which case it's double bubble. But it was okay. And I think it's seeing the positives that come out of it. And I've used it as a chance to try and come up with new material. And I've used it as a chance to start again a little bit with stand-up. I've decided not to use any pre-COVID stand-up on stage again. So I'm going to have to write a new act. So I think as long as you try and find positives, and I think it's been difficult with the kids, but they've got a lot closer with each other, even though they haven't been able to see their friends, which I think has been hard for them.
Lovely. We're really pleased to have you on our JLGB virtual programme as we celebrate 125 years of JLGB. We've been boosting positivity and keeping children and their families active, healthy and entertained for 21 solid weeks now since lockdown began, with the help of a special guest helping us each evening. Other than Neil pestering you, what made you say yes to joining us this evening?
I think it was mainly Neil pestering me, to be honest. Oh, it's very nice to be asked. I think you're doing great work here. It's fantastic that you've had so many guests on and kept this rolling. But it's also flattering that anybody under 40 is interested in anything, I have to say. As most of you were not alive if any of you were alive when I was properly on the television. So that's kind of weird to think. But yeah, no, it seems like a good endeavour, and charitable things are always worth supporting, I think.
We're all about acts of kindness here at JLGB, and we always ask our guests what they've been doing to help others. Is there a personal, particular act of kindness that you've done to help others in lockdown? In lockdown?
Well, I suppose I've been very concerned about the comedy industry and stand-up comedians in general. It was a very sudden shutdown without any warning, and comedians are not the best people at preparing for the future. And so it was, I think, you see comedians on TV, and even comedians of my level where I'm doing okay and doing lots of work away from the theatres. But most stand-up comedians, their entire work is in clubs. So to suddenly have that taken away, and many of them obviously have families and mortgages, So I was very concerned, and I'm just concerned about live comedy surviving really through this length of time away, and I think it will be the last thing to really properly go back as well, just by the nature of comedy venues. So I did start the lockdown by sort of helping to raise money for comedians, trying to encourage TV comedians who are still earning money to throw a bit of their money into a big pot, so that we could keep the few hundred comedians who wouldn't have any income going, at least until various schemes kicked in to help them. So we did like 2 or 3 months basically giving away 10 grand every week rather, and raised over £100,000, maybe about £120,000. Was not all down to me by any means, but it was nice to be a part of that. So and now as we're getting back, I'm doing a gig on Sunday in Clapham where it's to raise money for venues, which I think is probably the most important things in terms of keeping the business going. But it's been interesting because I think so many things have happened in these 4 or 5 months, that I mean all the stuff with Black Lives Matter, and lots of things that needed awareness, and I think kind of spreading awareness of all those things has also been important. And hopefully, the A-level stuff that I'm sure many of you have struggled and suffered through, it's been good to see how people power can make a difference and make people reassess things. And I hope young people will learn the lesson of the awful stuff that's just happened to them, and I know it's not sorted out for many of you, and realize that by being politically active you can hold people accountable for their mistakes. So I think we need to do that, and I think we need to keep an eye on politics in general, and hopefully, again, it's looking for the positives. Obviously there's lots of negatives in politics, and there's lots of unpleasant things happening in politics and in the world, but I'm hopeful that just by appreciating things like the NHS and all the key workers, and just like a guy comes I live in a village and there's no shops, there's one shop here, but say the guys who come in vans and sell, there's a butcher and a fishmonger, and just they've been coming throughout lockdown and supplying the village with food, and you think, well, we always did use them before, but hopefully we'll keep on using them and use them a bit more out of the understanding of how society holds together and how many people you need to keep it going. And I hope we'll remember those lessons, because and we'll remember all the people who've kept us going, not just the NHS though, mainly the NHS, but also all the people who just the people who drove the vans delivering food, the people who stocked the supermarkets, and all the teachers, everyone who took risks with their own health in order to help us keep going. I hope we can come together as a nation and heal the divisions that have been coming together, have been happening.
Definitely. So let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
About your childhood, growing up, and if you had any youth opportunities. You were the son of a headmaster.
Yeah.
So how was that experience for you?
Well, it was, it was all I knew. It was weird. I did a whole show about it called The Headmaster's Son about 12, 13 years ago. And I was lucky. I was at a nice school. It's a comprehensive school in Cheddar in Somerset. And I'd grown up through the whole system. We moved to Cheddar when I was about 8, so I'd been through the school system before we got to the school where my dad was the headmaster. My mum also taught me at middle school, so I had both my parents taught me at some stage in my life at actual school. Obviously, it's a little bit weird, and I think there's a part of me that probably enjoyed the celebrity of it, in that kids knew who I was. But also there was a teeny bit of bullying, though not really, because I think people were scared that they'd get into trouble for bullying me too much. But I guess there was a sort of suspicion around me, and I kind of wondered in this show whether that had led me to be the slight mess up of an adult that I'd become. But all the things that I'm obsessed with, which is comedy and let's just say crudity for now, were sort of with me before my dad was my headmaster. I thought when I was 4 years old, I was as obsessed with comedy and sexual functions and bodily functions as I would be as an adult. So I don't think it really massively affected me. I think the thing I realized was, as an adult, which I didn't think about until I was practically 40 years old, was how difficult it was from the other point of view, for my mum and dad to teach me and my dad to be a headmaster at the school that I was at. And I was a little bit cheeky and a little bit naughty, and he had to deal with that, and the teachers had to deal with that, and that's an odd situation for them. So you don't think about it from other people's point of view, I think, until much later. When you're young, you do think, I'm the main character in this film, and this is all about me. And it was quite a revelation to me to realise, there was an Ascension Day service at school, and my dad had called for a minute silence while we thought about whatever we were meant to be thinking about. And I did this massive burp from the crowd, and it came out much louder than I meant it to, but it was just meant to be a joke that I made a burp at the start of the minute silence. And, I could see my dad getting furiously angry. And then he sort of looked at me and realized it might have been me. And then he had to make a decision in that split second as to whether he was going to, tell me off in front of the whole school or let it go, And so that's that, I admire him because he had to cope with that and that sort of thing. And he did so incredibly well, I think. He didn't say anything. I think he feared it was me, so he didn't say anything and let it go. And I think that was probably the right thing to do, psychologically speaking, both as a headmaster and a parent. But yeah, so it was tough for us all, but also it was a lovely school. I had plenty of friends, and yeah, I don't know whether there was. All I wonder was whether there was a sort of suspicion about me, whether people would include me in everything for fear that I would tell on them, though I wasn't a narc. They would have been safe. But yeah, it was weird, but it was, I think, again, a lot of comedians either have sort of tragedy in their youth, or quite a lot of them have some kind of authority figure as a parent. There's a lot of clergymen and religious figures whose children go on to be comedians, and of quite a few headmasters and teachers and stuff like that. So I think it might have slightly propelled me towards this job, but this is what I always wanted to do, even before my dad was my headmaster.
So, as you said that you always wanted to do comedy, was there ever another career on the cards growing up?
Well, I mean, I didn't think I would be able to do it. This is what I wanted to do, but I did, when I was growing up in Somerset in the 1980s and had no entertainment in my family really of any kind, and certainly nothing professional. And when I went to my careers advisor when I was 15 and said I wanted to be a writer and a comedian, they said that wasn't on the form, so I wasn't allowed to do that. And I had to work in a bank or something was their idea, I think. And so it seemed like an impossible aspiration. So it wasn't like I was thinking, I think I probably thought I'd end up being a teacher like everyone else in my family. And that might have been a better way for me to go. Who knows? But, I wanted to give it a go. And when we did lots of comedy at school, so I wrote for School Magazine. I was lucky I was in a group of friends who were just as interested in comedy. And one of my best friends at school was this guy called Steve Cheek, who was very driven and ambitious, but also had worked out early on that the important thing about comedy was to try and be as original as possible. And so together we kind of came up with an ethos, but he went on to he worked in a double act with Simon Munnery, who's a very sort of avant-garde and successful comedian now. Steve has gone back to he's a professor at Bristol University, but he's a very, very clever man. So, I had this support group, and we did, unusually we'd done quite a lot of comedy work, writing our own. We did 3 or 4 sketch shows at school, put them on, sometimes in front of the school and sometimes sort of secret ones that were a bit ruder. So, it felt like it was moving in that direction. And when I went to university, I'd read a book called From Fringe to Flying Circus, which was all about the ancient history, really, of people like Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and Monty Python, and how they progressed from student review to sort of films and superstardom. And so I kind of knew that if I could go to Oxford or Cambridge, that there was a chance I could get involved in comedy there. And that seemed to be the route that I'd read about in this book. And again, I didn't know whether I could get into Oxford or Cambridge. I didn't apply for ages. I applied for Oxford in the end, and my kind of history teacher kind of encouraged me, but I had to make that decision myself. And so it wasn't like a definite thing that was going to happen. I was one of the cleverer kids in the school, but not many kids from our school got to go to Oxbridge. 1 or 2, and only in the last previous 10 years had people been at all. So it was like that was a big step and a big, that there was every chance I wouldn't end up going to that university. But that was, I knew that once I got to that university that I was going to attempt to pursue comedy and drama. But again, even when I went and I got in, I thought, but there's no way it'll happen. And, so it was, it was all just keeping on following your ambition, your dream, and hoping for the best. And luckily, all the doors kind of fell open for me as I approached them, and often shut behind me. But we were sort of very blessed and lucky in our first 10 years really of working, since I met Stuart Lee at university, and we started working together quite early on and did well and got to go to Edinburgh with student shows, then came to London and started writing for the radio and doing stand-up, and just things fell our way. We worked pretty hard, but things we were pretty lucky as well, I think, with the way things turned out. So yeah, I think maybe I'd have been a teacher, but I don't think there was anything that I wanted to do, acting or comedy or writing. I loved write. So as soon as I could write, I was writing stories, and I loved the idea of making people laugh. I loved people who made me laugh. My granddad was very funny. I was massively, as a kid, into, TV was much more of a important thing back then, especially when you lived in the countryside. You couldn't really get out and see very much stuff. So the TV comedians I saw, and also things like Monty Python, which I got a record, old-fashioned vinyl records, and listened to those and tapes. And so, I was kind of educating myself with comedy, and then Rick Mail and the Young Ones came out in about 1980, and that was sort of my epiphany, where I thought, this looks possible. These are just regular guys who have somehow got on TV and doing this madcap, crazy stuff. And, you thought maybe it's possible, but I didn't. Even now I'm still sort of surprised that I'm here and still doing it, and so are many people on Twitter, I have to say.
So you went on to form a double act with Stuart Lee and formed Lee and Herring.
Sorry to interrupt you, Abby, but Richard, as you know, on your podcast, when your show gets a bit serious, or maybe the guest is being a little bit dull, no offense, Oxford sounds great, but you ask an emergency question. I've got a copy of your book.
Okay, great.
I've actually got a few. I've got all the books somewhere.
Thank you.
But so my question for you, my first one is: would you rather have an elbow made of marshmallows or a foot transformed into a werefoot every full moon?
Is that one of yours, or is that one of mine? That's one of yours, is it?
That's definitely one of yours.
Is it? My goodness. Okay, I don't think I've ever asked that one. I've written so many of them that I don't remember. So, if an elbow made of marshmallow, a foot that transforms into a werefoot, is it? Yeah. I mean, I'd be quite interested with the werefoot. Really, I like marshmallow, but you can't get your elbow in your mouth, can you? That's one of the things you can't do. Yeah, you could pick it off. But I think for the novelty value of having a werefoot, depending how much, it couldn't do that much damage, could it? A werefoot? Does it turn into a wolf, or does it turn into a wolf's foot? Sorry?
No, it turns into a wolf.
It turns into an actual wolf. That's a stupid question. Well, I would like that, because it'd be company, wouldn't it? And it'd be scary. You could scare people off with your werefoot. Would it? Might bite you. Enough. Might bite you, don't it? Might bite your other foot. Yeah. Okay. I'll go for it though. I'm prepared to take the chance.
Fair enough. And my next question is: what's the best thing that you've ever found down the back of your sofa?
Yeah, I haven't found very much. I used to hide. I used to steal chocolates off the tree for my nephews and nieces when they were about 4 or 5, and I told them to hide the evidence down the sofa rather than throw it in the bin, so it wouldn't be discovered, because it could be discovered in the bin. So I did hide a lot of stuff in sofas. I think only money, I think, is the only thing I found. It would be lovely to have an old sofa and open it up, or reach down and find some first edition book, something, or some gold doubloon or something that had been left there for centuries. But yeah, I think I did used to go around, I think most kids did, when you had no money, when you were 10 or 11, you would sort of scour all the drawers and down the sofa and pick up any money you could. And it's sort of not stealing. It's sort of stealing, isn't it? But it's sort of not stealing.
A little bit.
It is if you're taking out of purses. I think if it's down the side of a sofa, that's sort of yours. Finders keepers. So unfortunately, probably about 53 pence is about the best I've done.
Fair enough. Could be worse. Anyway, Abby, I'll let you carry on.
Thank you. So we could get through the interview and not speak about your Leicester Square Theatre podcast. You're an early podcaster and became the UK's podcast king. So how did you get into podcasting? How did you even find out it was a thing? And how has the podcast world changed since you first started making them?
There's a lot of questions in there. I found out about it. Really, I didn't know much about it, and we started podcasting in 2008. I think January 2008, which was obviously pretty early. And it was actually the same month I started dating my wife, which was just a coincidence, but that's how I can remember when it was. So it was quite a big change in my life. I was 40, and things sort of changed for me in a lot of positive ways. I was sort of getting frustrated about doing stuff on TV and radio or not doing it, because you would come up with ideas, you have to pitch them, people would change them, they might you might do a pilot, it might get on, it might not get on, and there was lots of censorship, and especially around then there'd been a sort of kerfuffle about Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross had been rude to Andrew Sachs, who's an old actor, on their radio show, and the BBC had got very nervous about being offensive, and then there was just, this. I was working with a guy called Andrew Collins. We'd done some stuff on the radio, and then he sort of said, "Look, I've did this podcast with these guys at some magazine, I think music magazine, and it's all pretty easy. You just need a laptop, and you can just record it." And we just found someone who could upload it for us because we were duffers, and as it came to that, but we knew how to record it, and we just thought, why don't we just get together every week and have a chat, and maybe if after 2 or 3 weeks, if it's good, someone might let us back on the radio. It was almost as simple as that. But what appealed to me about it, and as we got going, what appealed to me about it was just the autonomy of being able to do whatever you wanted. I really loved the fact that you could have an idea and put it straight up, and it could go straight out. So we would record those podcasts, and they'd be up within 3 or 4 hours. So you could do topical jokes, you could be as rude as you wanted. Only people only listen to them if they really wanted to listen to them, so you weren't going to people's homes, so you were sort of protected from all that sort of stuff, which I think is fair enough. If you're going on the BBC and it's 6 o'clock and you start being terribly rude or saying offensive things, then that's going into people's homes, and I don't think that's on. But if they've chosen to download you, then that's their choice, and they can choose not to download the next one if they don't like it. So I realized quite quickly it was fun, really. We just were doing it for a laugh, and we did end up getting back on the radio as a result eventually. But slowly I kind of realized, you had an audience there that were coming back every week. I could promote my gigs, which, I was very early on, I was still seeing myself only as a stand-up comedian, and I saw the podcast just as a way of maybe I can direct a few people towards the live shows. And I saw within about a year or so, my audience had doubled, and it was really down to the podcast, from quite a small number to a slightly bigger number. So all those things I liked about it. But it was really, and people were saying to me, "What? But you're not getting paid. Why are you doing this? This is crazy." And it's going, well, no, it's not about the money. It's about doing something that you want to do and doing it under your own terms, and not being hassled by the man and not being told you have to change anything. So I just like that freedom, really. And then the more I did it, the more I kind of thought, we realized we could do live shows and charge people to come and see them. So there was a way of making a bit of money. But anyway, it was, affecting my stand-up revenue. So I was getting more money from stand-up as a result. So it was working as a business idea, even though that hadn't really been the intention. It did lead to some other work as well. But I just realized, there's all the equipment now, it's got easier and easier. You can make your own stuff very easily. You can put it out there very easily. And I was always just more interested in the content than anything else. Fame or money is sort of, the money's all right. Fame's not as great as it could be cracked up to be, but it's nice to get paid for what you're doing, but it's not the be all and end all of it. And I just sort of saw, hey, I could I did a show called As It Occurs to Me, which was like a weekly stand-up and sketch show that I wrote the night before we did it. And and then that sort of moved. Once that Collins and Herring stopped, it sort of realized, well, maybe I can just try and do that with different people every week. So I would just try things out, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. I did some very weird stuff, which I'm still doing, like playing myself at snooker and commentating on it as an audio podcast. I'm not very good at snooker. And I've recently started clearing stones from a field and explaining how to do that to people. So there's sort of avant-garde, sort of almost artistic ideas that are about stretching something boring over a long period of time. And and then RHLSTP, which was the Leicester Square Theatre thing, did sort of take off, and I got big name people were kind of keen to do it very early on. And so, because I'd got in early, and most people weren't interested in doing podcasts at that time because they didn't get, you didn't get money for doing them. I think I was able to sort of rise up more quickly than I might have done, and sort of get a good foothold in the business, in the medium. And I've been doing the Leicester Square Theatre podcast for 8 years now, I think, and maybe 9 if you include the Edinburgh ones. And I've done, you've done quite a lot of episodes of your thing in just this year, but I've done something like 300 episodes of this podcast, maybe 400, including the Edinburgh ones, maybe a bit more. So, you get better and better at what you're doing. So you have this opportunity. No one's telling you that. When I did TV, we'd do a couple of series or something, then the executives would change and they'd say, okay, we don't want you to do anymore. But with this, I'm on series 19, of podcast, and they're loosely divided into series, and I can finish it when I want to finish it, really. So that freedom is amazing, and things have changed massively, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. Obviously, more and more people have got into podcasting, and there is now money in podcasting because people are coming to see live shows, and some of them have got so big they can play much bigger venues than a lot of TV comedians could play. I'm still fairly modest in that, but I've had my biggest audiences I've ever had have been with podcasts, where I've had something like 1,200 people, in Glasgow, and 1,100 people in Birmingham, and Leicester Square Theatre has sort of peaked at 400, but that's as big as it is. There's definitely ones which have sold a lot more. And also there's now advertising and stuff coming into it, and people are keen to advertise in it. So suddenly it's turned into a business, and I'd love to pretend I was a really clever businessman who'd seen this right at the beginning and knew how it was all going to pan out. But it's still 12 years of, it's 12 years of work, and I only really started getting paid for doing it, in any manageable degree. I mean, I could probably make a living from podcasting now. I tend to put most of it back into making more shows because I want to do an audio sitcom. I've started doing a ventriloquist act with my 128-year-old scary ventriloquist puppet. Sorry to suddenly bring that up to scare you. He's a bit frightening. My great granddad made that, and so I've started doing that. And so in lockdown, now I'm on Twitch as well, which is usually gamers, but you can do comedy on it. And again, it's just have an idea, see where it goes. And lockdown's been great for that, and that I've created this possible stupid show of me talking to a ventriloquist dummy. And I've been doing lots of snooker and stone clearing and all sorts of things. So it's as well as carrying on doing the podcast. So it's the main podcast. So yeah, it's exciting. But I think just as a creative person, the idea of cutting out that part, that gatekeeper that says this isn't good or this is good. When I know some of the things I've written, I know are really good, and if they put them on TV or made them, they would do well with a bit of luck. But you've got to convince other people of that. They'll come in and say, I want to do it like this. You go, no, I don't want to do it like that. They say, okay, we're not going to do it. And so to be able to just prove yourself and get on with stuff. And I suppose in the last 10 years, that's what I've done. I've just sort of got on with stuff on my own. Probably 80% of my work is self-generated. So as a stand-up, you're doing that anyway. I've been creating stand-up shows every year and touring them. So you're just getting work off your own bat, and then occasionally someone will come, something like Taskmaster, which maybe we'll talk about, or the little bits of telly I've been doing will come in and you'll do that, and that's someone else's thing. But basically nearly everything is my own stuff, and I seem to still be coming up with ideas, and some of them are better than others. But with the internet, you're able to find out, and you can find out. With comedy, the great thing about comedy, as much as anyone, every comedian gets people on Twitter going, well, I don't see how you're a comedian, you're not funny. And you go, well, this is a job which absolutely, there's no job that is as assessed as much as comedy is. Every single time you get on stage, you are assessed. You get a report back from the consumers. If they don't laugh, you're not doing your job. If they do laugh, you're doing well. If they keep paying to come and see you, it means you're doing well. So, as much people go so-called comedian about any comedian who's working is a comedian. And any comedian who people are paying to see is a comedian. So, so it's lovely to have that autonomy, and I feel very happy. And for the, I think I wasn't really happy when we did TV stuff in the 90s, and it was hard work, and we had to make compromises, and we were pulling in different directions, Stuart and I, quite a lot. So it's nice just to be able to get on and do absolutely your own thing and live or die by it as well. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's it. The thing about being a comedian is that's it. If people aren't watching you, aren't laughing at you, aren't paying to see you, then that's the end of it. So I kind of always wanted to create interesting stuff, and I always wanted to keep relevant, and I always wanted to push myself and not get stuck in one thing, which is why I've written books, I've written sitcoms, I've written plays, I've done a lot of different sorts of comedy, and because I want to keep pushing myself and finding out what I can do and what I'm capable of, and keep trying to create something that surprises me as well. And that's what I'm able to do online. I'm able to do that. Whatever else happens, it's sort of as long as the audience is there to come and watch it, then it can still exist.
So, as you said before, that your show focuses on interviewing celebrities, quite like what we've been doing in lockdown. What tips do you have for running these interviews, and how do you put your interviewees at such ease?
I don't know. Again, it wasn't something I'd really thought about or practiced. I think given that I am also a comedian and most of my guests are comedians, I think I know what not to ask. I know what comedians get asked all the time. I kind of know what will be interesting to them and what won't be interesting to them. And I think the emergency questions, which came about sort of accidentally, because I very early on interviewed Jonathan Ross, and I didn't really know him at all, and was a bit surprised he'd done it, and I was a bit intimidated because he's a very successful interviewer. It was like maybe my fourth interview, and I just got to a point where I just couldn't think of anything to say for a second, and it felt like a minute, but it was probably 10 seconds. And I just thought, well, I should have just some general questions some stupid questions I can ask to fill in if anything like that happens, or if something goes a bit weird or whatever. And so I just started writing these slightly stranger questions, but again, that accident and that thing that came out of my incompetence really was sort of accident. A lot of the things you do, a lot of the good decisions you make, I think, are accidental, and in hindsight they look like, oh, that was brilliant planning. That'll lead to you doing 3 books and this being a very successful podcast. What it did, people get asked the same things all the time. If you ask them something they've never been asked, you sort of have to use a different part of your brain to answer that, right? So if you've got a script, I think like comedians and celebrities have a script, and you go, well, tell me about the time you were in your most successful show. And then they basically run the script off. If you ask them something they've never been asked and have never even thought of, they have to think on the spot, and they want to be entertaining and they want to be funny, and you'll get good. For every one that goes wrong and nothing happens, there'll be 9 or 10 where you get something extraordinary. And again, very early on, I interviewed Stephen Fry, and it wasn't even one of my questions, but a question that my director's son, who was about 11 years old at the time, had asked me to ask him, which is what's it like being Stephen Fry? And I think because of the audience, who are a lovely audience, and I'm very lucky to have very nice people come and see me. There's a lovely atmosphere in the theatre. It feels a friendly place, and I think that's what made him open up. So he opened up and sort of talked about a suicide attempt that he'd had. It was very serious, but it was also very bold and electric and important as well that he talked about it, because it was about mental health and about how he'd got through this experience and the importance of getting through it. And then he went on to being just very funny again. But it was, I think, by having opened up, this is my theory, but by having asked questions that can't be prepared for, that you haven't told the guest they're going to get, that you open up a different part of their brain. And then when they go back to talking about themselves, you still get different stories. So you get new stories, even about their most famous thing. And I think I'm very open, I'm very honest. And so I think that I'm very happy to share my foibles and my failures and, what a useless human being I am. And I think when someone does that, then that means you're also happy to do that. You go, okay, this is fine. We're in a safe place where we can talk about this. So I don't really know. I think which you've done very well. And the other interviews I've seen, you've done very well. It's just polite to know who you're talking to and know about them, and have done more than just read a press release. which you go and do a lot of interviews, and you are and especially someone at my level, I absolutely know the interviewer has no clue who I am at all, right? Which is fine. I don't expect them to. But if they're going to interview you, at least spend 20 minutes looking through. It's easy to find stuff about anyone now online. So, I research my guests well enough. If there's something in the research, you think you read an interview with them, you go, why didn't they ask this? Why? I want this. What's interesting about the story isn't in this interview. So you make a note. I will make notes, and I will have ideas of what I'm going to talk about. But I also love them when they're just free flowing, and especially with funny people where we just get riffing about a funny idea that isn't even anything about them. So it is getting people at their ease somehow. I think you've got to be, what I'm good at, I think, having been in lots of double acts, is I can quite quickly work out where my status is in the interview and therefore how to react. So if I'm talking to someone more serious who's uncomfortable and worried about being funny, I'll up the funniness. If I'm talking to someone very funny, or someone who really, I did an interview with Brian Blessed, who I didn't really need to be there, but I managed to inject when I needed to a question or a comment, and I knew exactly, I knew I didn't have that much choice in that one, but I knew you work out how much you have to participate. So some people are quieter, as you'll notice with me. You can ask a question and I'll carry on talking for 15 minutes if I come down to it. But if you're interviewing someone who's quiet, Mackenzie Crook, who's a genius and a lovely man, would often answer questions with one word, and then you have to find a way of extracting a bit more. So it's just being able to move your own personality, and I think, to let the guest lead in terms of how it's going to be. So if the guest wants to be serious or a bit more serious, that's fine. I might undercut it a little bit. But if the guest's up for a laugh, I'll push it on. We'll see how far we can push things. Sometimes we'll push things too far and collapse, and sometimes it'll be okay. But it's what's beautiful about comedy, what's beautiful about an interview is it's a leap of faith. A joke is a leap of faith. You'll do something. I've often just got to take a risk. Will this work in the face of? I did a great interview with Richard E. Grant, which sadly never got to go out because for whatever reason, him or his people didn't want it to go out, and I don't understand it because he was brilliant, and it was one of my favorite interviews I've done. But we were talking about the Oscars. He'd actually just not failed to win the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, and but he was talking about the pre stuff where he'd been very giddy and excited, and most people loved him and thought this was great that he was so excited about getting an Oscar nomination. And then one journalist had said, "Yeah, he's doing that. He's playing the game. He's hoping that will make him win if he appears to be this, this frivolous, happy idiot, or whatever it was." And he said, "I'm really upset about that." And he generally was very upset about this journalist. I said, "Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, if you were that good an actor, you'd have won the Oscar." And so it was a massive risk because I didn't know him. I hadn't even really met him before the interview on that one. He could easily have stormed off. He could easily have said, "You can't put this interview out," which he did, but I don't think it was because of that. But, it was a big laugh. And also he laughed and went, "Yeah, that's, very funny. That's true." And so it was lovely. It was a lovely moment, but I had to make that leap of faith, and it could equally have gone, "How dare you?" And he could have stormed off. So you've got to take chances with comedy, and you've got to be in an environment where you feel you can take those chances. And I suppose that's it. I'm a little bit rude to my guests, but ultimately I hope they all know they're there because I hugely respect them. I again get to choose the guests. So it's the hardest thing about it is booking the guests. But I'm only having people on that I at least like, but usually massively respect. I think that means that I can be a little bit cheekier with them because I guess I sit between, some of the younger ones, grew up watching my TV shows, and so they're slightly excited to meet me. And I think the older ones, are aware of who I am generally, and sort of trust me a little bit. And I suppose the longer it goes on, the more you build up that trust. Interesting. It's an interesting
time. We have loads more questions.
Okay.
So we're going to go to the audience now
Okay.
for a few more. So we're going to go to Samuel first of all.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hello, Samuel. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Good.
I've heard you write a blog every single day.
Yeah.
Going on since 2002, so that's quite a long time now, almost 2 decades. So what influenced you to start it, and what does it mean to you all these years later in 2020, 18 years worth of 365 days of a blog?
Yeah.
And has it helped you to stay sane throughout the lockdown?
I don't know about yeah.
And would you recommend blog writing to others?
Yeah, well, I would. I know it's kind of a bit old-fashioned thing. In 2002, it seemed like quite a new thing. Again, I was quite an early adopter of that sort of thing. Though people have been doing it in the late 90s, I think. The reason I started it was I was just in a point where I'd just finished. I'd been writing the sitcom Time, Jet and Please with Al Murray. It'd been very, very hard work, and we'd written 35 episodes. I'd done most of the writing, and I was, for the first time in my life, had a bit of financial security as a result, but B, I was sort of a little bit. I'd moved house, or I was about to move house, and I was a little bit lost, and I was wondering what was going to happen next. We'd had this sort of TV success, and then I'd written this sitcom, and then that had stopped, and I just felt like I was wasting a lot of time. Right? I didn't have to go to work because I had money, and I was sort of sitting in their flat and not getting anything done. And I read a Douglas Adams book called The Salmon of Doubt, which was just a collection. He wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and all sorts of things, and was a very big influence on me as a kid. He died very young, about 48 years old. And he'd really struggled with writer's block. And there was just this book of a collection of some of his essays. And I just thought, isn't it really sad? This guy, was such a genius. He died so young and had so many ideas, but actually didn't get loads of them down. And I just sort of thought, I want to get back into writing. And it's called warming up, because initially I thought if I just sit down for half an hour in the morning and write anything, then that'll mean that I'm in the mood to write something. I just felt like days and weeks were passing by and nothing was happening. It didn't work, because I would write a blog and sort of feel like I'd done some work and then not do anything else. But it was a really good exercise in terms of, I'd write it the next day. So I'd look back on the whole day, go, what was interesting or funny about that day? And then you had to come up with something. And most of my days, like lockdown, not all the days are the same and not that much is happening. So you really had to struggle to home in on what might be interesting. And sometimes you failed. So as a writer, it's a brilliant exercise, because you've just got to do it quickly. You get better and better at writing, but you get better at working out how to write, what's interesting to write about, and how, once you get in a flow with writing, you can suddenly find something else. So you go, I'll write about that, see what happens. Then bang, so an idea will happen, and you've written something quite good. I wasn't even doing stand-up at the time. But when I came back to stand-up, I realized I had quite a lot of stuff with it. Even if you're writing one good thing a month, that's still 12 potential routines a year. And I think the hit rate's better than once a month. So, I was creating loads of material. And then when I got back to stand-up, I realized I could use that material. And when I wrote books, I realized I wrote a book about turning 40, and I realized I had basically a diary. I don't write very personal things in there generally. And I'm very conscious of not writing about other people or, affecting other people's lives, because it's going out online. But when I wrote my book, there was loads of stuff I could use for the book, and there was loads of stuff that I'd forgotten. I look back at it now, and I often can't remember the incident that I wrote about or the thing I wrote about. So it's just this, when it stretches out over 18 years, I mean, it's crazy to do it every day, but now I'm doing it every day. It's very difficult to say I'm going to take a day off, because, you've created this, I mean, it's 6,000 entries or something, you've created this sprawling thing. But I think it becomes a very interesting little snapshot of your life. It becomes a very interesting snapshot of our times. I don't think it's Samuel Pepys level, but I think, somewhat a social historian could look back at it in 100 years' time and get some idea of what the early 21st century was like. Or certainly, it's interesting because obviously you're writing as things develop, as diaries are. So, things change, and then things are the same as well. I think I've tried to lose weight and put on weight and lost weight, about 15 times during those 18 years. So some things are just the same thing over and repeated over and over again. But yeah, as a writer, I just think then when I wrote for the Metro for a few years, and I found that much easier than I would have done, because I was basically writing a Metro article every day, and then you'd have the groundwork to take that and turn it into an article, but also and tidy it up a bit. But I think by giving myself the permission to be boring, to give my permission to try something, and if it didn't work, it didn't matter. And it didn't matter because, some people read it, but it's not really even for them. It's just by putting it up, it means it happens. I don't even know how many people read it. So, it's been a really good thing to do. And and I guess it's just been a great way to create some ideas for other stuff and keep your brain working. But if you want to be a writer, I would recommend it. Or just a diary. You don't have to put it up online, just as an exercise to get better at, getting ideas down and understanding the way that an article or a routine or, a story is generated and how you can best express that. So I just think by doing it, people say, how do you become a stand-up comedian? And the answer is you just get up there and do it, and you do it and do it until you work out who you are and what you want to say. And anything else is just procrastination. You just need to get out there and do it. If you want to be a writer, I would highly recommend writing something every day, even if it's for yourself, even if it's 100 words. But yeah, it's been really interesting, and it's going to be hard to stop. But it's incredible that nothing has happened to me in 18 years that has stopped me doing it. So I've never been so ill that I haven't been able to write for a week, or I've never had such a tragic thing happen that I can't sit down and face writing it. There's been some bad things that have happened, but sometimes I write two and catch up a couple of days. But if you let more than 3 days slip away, you're not going to be able to go. And certainly now I couldn't do it unless I did it the next day, because it's very difficult to think of anything. But I think a lot of my more esoteric stand-up has come from that, because one of the examples was, I remember sitting for ages thinking nothing happened yesterday. And then I remembered I'd been in a supermarket and I bought 9 yogurts, and at the checkout, the woman had said, "Oh, someone likes yogurt." And I'd completely forgotten about it and it didn't even strike me at the time. There's a routine in that. But then I thought, that's all that happened. I'll write about that. And I wrote a blog, and then that turned into a routine, and that routine turned into like sometimes an hour-long routine about how I didn't particularly like yogurt, but I was just buying them to store in my fridge, but then becoming like, seemingly this man is obsessed with yogurt. So that routine would never have existed. That idea of doing something like that would never have existed if I hadn't been forced to think, what the hell happened yesterday? And take a very tiny thing from life, and let's try and turn that into something. And there's lots of times I've taken a tiny thing from life, tried to turn it into something and failed, but you just need to hit once every now and again and you're off.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, that's a good question.
Interesting answer.
Good series of questions.
Yeah.
And the next question is from Izzy.
Hello, Izzy.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So my question is, you seem to love celebrity TV game shows, and you finished second on Celebrity Mastermind with your special subject,
Why did I bring that
You've
up?
also been on Pointless Celebrities,
I have.
The Chase, and Tipping Point. Which one was your favourite? Do you take the winning and losing seriously? And is any cheating Richard Osman has accused celebrities of?
No, well, he accused people of cheating on my podcast. No, I don't cheat. I am very competitive. I take it very seriously, all of them really. And I've done Pointless 4 times. 3 of them have been out, and I was knocked out in the first round in the first one, in the second round in the second one, in the third round in the third one. I can't tell you what happened in the fourth one. But I love that show. I think Richard Osman is a genius. I love House of Games, which I've done a couple of times and won both times. I haven't yet done The Chase, but I'm doing it in about 2 weeks' time. Tipping Point hasn't been out yet, so I can't talk about that. But that was Ben Shepherd is an amazing presenter and does brilliantly with that slightly crazy show. Taskmaster I've just done as well, which I can't talk about too much, but that was unbelievable amount of fun to do. I've never laughed as much in my life as I did for the 5 days that we recorded on that show. But I think I would have loved to have won Mastermind. I did very, very well on Mastermind. And I think at the point that I finished, I was the highest scoring ever contestant on Mastermind, but then I still lost because the next person got one more point. So it's quite good because it creates this brand of me being a very try-hard person who keeps failing, though I have started winning some of these games. So it's that's slightly ruined things. But I don't know. I think I might go for House of Games as my favorite sort of quiz one, which is the other Richard Osman show, because it kind of appeals to comedians. This show is kind of lateral thinking more than a quiz show, but it still becomes very competitive. I think Richard Osman is an absolute genius. He's a guy who loves TV and loves both highbrow and lowbrow stuff and treats it with equal reverence, which I think is correct. And I think those quiz shows are often the things that people remember years later, and I think Pointless especially is, they're so good on it and it's such a good idea and it's quite a hard quiz. I wish I'd won Mastermind, but I don't want to go back on Mastermind because it was too hard and I'd worked very hard on it. I think I would go for House of Games as a quiz, and Taskmaster as probably just the most brilliant experience I've had on TV in my whole life.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we were talking about this briefly before, but I think everyone needs to hear it. So in recent years, you've been a hero on International Women's Day. As you took to Twitter to respond to those asking if there was also an International Men's Day, which led to you raising lots of money for charity, and about your book. So is there any advice that you have regarding your book to anyone watching that maybe you wish you knew when you were younger?
Well, definitely buy my book and read my book. That's my main advice. So I've written a book about this, about my International Women's Day sort of marathon, which I did over 9 different, March the 8th, I think, which was just a finding. Not just me, but people realized that you'd go on Twitter and there'd be a lot of people on International Women's Day asking when's International Men's Day, as if there never would be one. It's like, I'd love to see International Men's Day. It was that sort of stupid attitude, which back in the early 2010s felt like a niche and comedic thing. Now it sort of feels a bit more like the more general consensus, which again, I think the Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter thing is comes from the same place and is a horrible place. Because why go on, why try and ruin International Women's Day by talking about yourself? It's basically like, going to someone else's birthday party and going, when's my birthday? Why are you getting presents? I want presents. And especially given that, as in terms of equality, the balance of the things that are unequal for men it doesn't match up with the things that are unequal for women. But there is an International Men's Day. So I didn't think this would become a big deal. I did it for fun. It was a self-defeating thing to do because it's like King Canute trying to turn back a tide that's never going to turn back, and I knew it from the start, and I knew I would spend all day doing this, getting increasingly angry, sometimes jokingly and sometimes really, and never change anything. And it wasn't until 6 or 7 years in, someone said, why don't you try and raise money with this? So I wouldn't have thought of doing that. And so that was wonderful because it turned into being this a big money raiser for Refuge, just by saying, if you've enjoyed this, chuck some money this way. And I would never have anticipated the amounts of money that were raised in a day were insane. And I did that 3 times. And then it's a very wearing thing. It's a difficult thing to do. And also just increasingly the responses, especially from men, but sometimes from sort of more extreme feminists who don't think I should be making the day about myself, which I have some sympathy with, got quite nasty. And so I decided to stop it. But then a publisher came to me and said, would you write a book about it? And it's sort of a book about, I think it's an important thing because I think it's a book about, it's a funny book and it's a short book. And it's a book where I do some of my silly tweets, but also talk about what is called The Problem with Men. And it's about where men have found themselves and why they're in this position where they're being this sort of childish behavior, really, and whether we can actually make International Men's Day a thing for men. Because I think ultimately asking about that on International Women's Day damages men as much as women, because it means if you wanted to celebrate International Men's Day, it becomes like a thing that's in response to something else, which it shouldn't be. We're not fighting, we're not at war. There's the battle of the sexes and there's the badinage between the sexes, and that's all fine. But we're all human beings. We're all working together. And if you generally want equality, which these International Men's Day men claim they want, then women getting equality will mean you get equality. That's how equality works. So it's very simple stuff. But the book surprised me. I think when you think about something like this and you think about a subject and you have to write 25,000 words about it, you do surprise yourself, and things came up with it that I didn't think I would come round to the idea of actually celebrating International Men's Day, but I think it's worth doing. And if you look at what it was when it was created, it isn't about women, and it isn't about mental health really particularly, or suicide, or all these other things that are important issues with men. It's about men being responsible and being good family people and being appreciated and being treated the same, but also men becoming better men, which I think we need to be. I think men are confused, and I don't think there's much difference between men and women really. I think a lot of the stuff is imposed on whatever civilization, society you're with. Obviously, gender's become a much more fluid thing. I mean, I say become, but many civilizations have recognized this over centuries. And so the idea of, I think the idea of talking about men and women is even sort of redundant. We're all just people, and some of us are better at some things and some of us are better at other things. And it actually, some of it corresponds with strength, and but not that much of it. So, or whatever. So, I think it's just about trying to, which I did in my show. I did a show which was an answer to the vagina monologues about men's genitalia. And that was sort of similarly just trying to help men, I think, and myself, because I'm far from perfect, move onwards and work out what our role is in the modern world. So I think International Men's Day could do that. And I just think, we need to stop this whataboutery and also everyone looking at themselves, go, what about me? What about me? When am I getting a day? When am I getting a day? We're all in this together. Some men are afraid of feminism. Some men are afraid of the idea of women, being cleverer or funnier than them. It seems insane to me. You want the best people to be doing the job they're best at, so we have a better society. And you want the best. Want to promote everyone who's able to do it. So it's just a little tiny step, and it's not and it's not trying to scare men off, and it's not trying to I'm not trying to be an expert. I'm not Russell Brand. I'm not claiming to be an expert on feminism, because I'm not, but it's the logic, I think, of just understanding why that one question leads to other stuff. So it does lead to that all lives matter stuff, which is much more dangerous and insidious, I think. It's I sort of compare when's International Men's Day being like the marijuana that leads you onto the hard stuff of then becoming a racist. But it's also trying to, the patriarchy, I think, is not quite as bad for men as it is for women. But for many men, the patriarchy, the weird thing is men stand up to their, kind of most stereotypes. People go, well, we're not really like that. But a lot of men go, yeah, that stereotype of me, that's what I'm like. And it's a horrible stereotype. And also they prop up the patriarchy, which for most men doesn't do them any good. Men are being sent to war, men have been sent down mines, so historically, and the patriarchy doesn't do them any good. And yet they will back it up like anything. And that's a weird thing as well. So I think making people realize that moving forwards and creating a more equal society might actually benefit them more than propping up the thing that's harming them. And these men are so going, yeah, look, men are more likely to commit suicide. Men are more depressed. Men are go to prison more. Men are going to war. You go, yeah, why? But that's not women doing that. That's not women. That's a patriarchal society largely led by men. So you're actually fighting for the same thing. And I think if you can realize that, if you realize that, you can just shift your brain a little bit and realize that who your actual enemy is. And constantly we're being, the people in power are attempting to make us fight each other and creating any kind of scapegoat away from the actual people who are responsible. Which I do not need to tell any of you leads to some terrible, terrible places. And the truth is, if we all work together, we'll do a lot better. So it's but it's lovely to go. It was lovely to write a book on lockdown and get it done. I don't know how I did it. It was hard. I wasn't in a creative space, but it was actually interesting the way that lockdown, everything with the statue being thrown in the river, the Black Lives Matter stuff, even COVID sort of showing the male leader's approach compared to the female leader's approach, generally speaking, not entirely, but Trump and Boris Johnson seeing it as a war against the virus, and Jacinda Ardern seeing it as something that people need to come together and combat in a more sensible fashion. It sort of hopefully showed where we could progress if we, it's not even male and female, though I think that it is females. There's no reason men can't be sensitive and empathetic, but men feel they have to be combative and Trump is just International Men's Day made into a horrible caricature and made to rule the world. So that's an odd one.
So we actually have 400 people watching on Facebook
my goodness
right now. And we still have quite a few more questions.
Okay.
So I'm sorry that it's overrunning a bit, but we have another audience question from Alex.
Hi, Richard.
Hello.
Hi, a bit of a lighter question than the last.
Okay.
So, as well as your Leicester Square Theatre podcast, you also have two other quirkier podcasts. So, Me One versus Me Two Snooker.
Yeah.
Or recently, The Stone Clearing.
Yes.
Which is about removing stones from a field. So, how did they both start? Can you talk about them? And are you surprised they have so many listeners?
I don't know if they've got that many listeners. I don't really care. But I think I'm surprised they've got any listeners. But I think people recognise in them the snooker one started. I used to play myself at snooker when I was 14, and my brother and sister are a bit older than me. And when I was on my own, I would play myself at snooker and commentate, and pretend to be two different players. I think a lot of people have that experience as a child. I was actually in a backstage area at a comedy gig, and they had a snooker table, and I started playing myself and tweeting about it. And I just was interested. And I called myself Me One and Me Two, and people started supporting on, ironically or whatever, Me One and Me Two, and getting quite into it. And I just thought there's something interesting in that. And I love the idea of taking an idea to its limits and stretching it and seeing what you can do. So that started, I think, in maybe even before the Leicester Square Theatre podcast, but certainly a good 8 or 9 years ago. And I haven't done it every week, but I've done 104 frames of that, plus some other extraneous stuff over the lockdown. And I love it's about exploring. It's a slightly artistic idea, and it did become like I performed at a festival of transgressive art, along with a lot of people who are doing very odd things to their bodies and parts of their bodies we don't want to possibly mention. And I was doing something sort of dull, but making you, I think, consider that the battles we have are often between ourselves. I like the idea. There's lots of comedic stuff I like about it. I'm not very good at snooker. I don't really understand the rules of it properly. You don't see many sports where someone who's not that good plays it. I think that's quite interesting. And also, I was doing it in audio to begin with for most of the time, which I thought was funny as well. So I just thought I'd give it a go and see if people got into it. And I think initially the idea was to try and lose every listener. I started with that 30,000 and it got down to about 5,000. And then it's I think I haven't checked the figures, but I couldn't shake off the last 5,000 people. And similarly with stone clearing, I was just going around the field with my dog, and it's a stony field. And I thought, I just started thinking about whether it would be possible in the years I have remaining to clear it of all the stones. I didn't know if that would be what the farmer wanted. I didn't know if that would be good or bad for the field, but it was also a 35-acre field with stone, probably 1 billion stones on it. So I'm quite obsessive, as you may have gathered from my blogging and everything else I'm doing. So I realized I was doing it for reals, but I kind of thought, this is funny as well. And it would be funny to do a podcast in which I try to explain this as if it's a difficult thing to do, as if there would be more than 1 or 2 techniques to do this, as if it would be something that would be interesting to lots of people. So it's sort of a bit about the vacuity of podcasting. but also it's about a man attempting to defeat nature, and also I'm trying to build a wall that will be visible from space that will be there in 10,000 years' time. So it's about trying to fight your own redundancy, and it's sort of about how a lot of the things we do in life are meaningless and pointless, and we will all be forgotten and dead in a ditch like the stones, the cold stones of winter. So again, I thought there was just something poetic about it, and I thought people might get a kick out of it. But it's like an art, I feel that's, if I was a Turner Prize artist and was doing that, I think I might win the Turner Prize. I think it's that kind of idea, but because I'm a comedian, it's seen as being frivolous, which it is as well. But it's I just want to explore it, and also I'm interested in, if you're doing something like literally walking around a field or playing snooker, it's the same thing really every time. Is it possible to make it different enough that people will want to listen to it every single time? Is it possible to find new areas of comedy or thought within something that is very dull and very repetitive? And so it's as much an exercise in trying to push myself creatively, because talking for 45 minutes as you walk around a field is quite difficult. And just to keep up that monologue. When I was doing stand-up, I remember early on seeing someone, Reg D. Hunter it was, who seemed to just improvise a 30-minute set. I thought it'd be amazing. I was very prepared for all my shows and had everything written. And so the idea of me doing, again, like 70 shows where I've walked around a field and, done the same thing and managed to find new stuff to talk about or new ways of exploring madness. And a lot of them are about exploring madness, I think, which is a worry, because every now and again you worry you actually tipped over the edge. But comedy is a lot about skirting that line between sanity and insanity, and I think I find that interesting. So a lot of the things, I'm doing a ventriloquist act as well, which is similar. It's about dividing yourself into two and that's schizophrenia. So it's examining the human mind whilst being dull but trying to be funny as well. So I think they're quite challenging. I'm delighted that enough people enjoy them for me to carry on doing them. But to be honest, I could carry on doing them if no one was listening, which would be better. It'd be much better if no one listened.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
So you have stood up a lot for disability rights. You're a patron of the charity Scope, and you wrote, you signed an open letter to the Prime Minister about the statistics that nearly 2 in 3 of the coronavirus deaths are disabled people. And why is this important to you?
Again, it's something I fell into almost by accident, and I'm really glad it happened to me. But I don't really have any massive personal connection to it. I've got a friend who does have a daughter with very, very mild cerebral palsy, and I've got a friend, Francesca Martinez, who's a comedian who has cerebral palsy. So it was something I was interested in. But I was basically about 2004. I was trying to pull. I was in a bit of a low place, and I was trying to do various stunts and just trying to pull myself out of it. And I wanted to run the marathon, and then a friend of mine said, if you run it for Scope, you get a guaranteed place. So it was literally that, just literally someone said, oh, I'm doing it with Scope, why didn't you do it with Scope? And so I went and ran the marathon for Scope, and I ended up sort of doing these charity programs that I was, again, when I was doing my genital-based stand-up show, I tried to do it for Macmillan. I tried to raise money for Macmillan Cancer, for testicular cancer, and they didn't want to be associated with the show. So I sort of had done this marathon for Scope. I said, do you want me to collect money for you? And they said, yeah, of course we do. And in the end, I think I've raised something like £250,000 for Scope just from those programs over the last 15 years. So it was a bad mistake by Macmillan, I think, to be snooty about it. But I then... there's this brilliant woman at Scope called Vivian Elliott, who kind of got me invited to lots of things, and I went to a school and met loads of the kids at the school and saw where the money that I'd raised through the program and through the marathon had gone, and I just sort of I just thought it's a really important charity. It's like, and people are weird about disabilities, and I have been in my life as well before I kind of got into this, and certainly comedians have often joke about disability, and I certainly was guilty of that as well. you know, when I was much younger. And I just felt like people are very keen to get behind animal charities and all sorts of charities, and yet disability is something that, you know, potentially almost definitely will affect us all, probably personally. I met at one of the events, I talked to a disabled person, and I said, well, you know, what do we call it? Able-bodied? What's the right word for able-bodied people? Able-bodied seems wrong. Able seems wrong. And she said, we call you the not yet disabled. And I think that was the real moment where I thought, yeah, that's, you know, why are people, they're scared about this subject. And I understand that they're scared of becoming disabled, or they're scared of they want to pretend it's a thing that doesn't exist, just to make their lives feel better. But we're all going to get old. We're either going to die or we're going to get old. And if we get old, we're going to be disabled, and we might be disabled long before that. So it's sort of weird that people don't care about it. But I just think it's a very important issue. I'm very, and I think it's also good that I've, again, most of my stuff I do is accidental. That I accidentally got involved with something. It's easy to get involved with a charity that you have some personal connection to. And I think it's kind of nicer and more, not nicer, but it's more, there's something interesting about being involved with a charity that you don't necessarily have anything directly connecting you to, apart from the fact that disability can affect us all. So I realized how important it was. Meeting the kids at the school was very important, and connecting with them. And I think it also massively helped me. I was in a very low point when I started getting involved with Scope, and then again back in 2008, I went to see this Christmas show at the school, and again, it just these realizations that that the preconceptions you have, and it just made me realize that something that it should be palpably obvious, that disabled children are just children, and that they're exactly the same as any children. It's a Christmas show like any other one, but with very severely disabled kids involved. But they got so much out of it, and it was such a human moment where I understood my own stupidity and my own selfishness. And I watched it, and I was sort of thinking, and I also need to turn my own life around. I'm being a ridiculous idiot. So it was very important for me personally, and I'm really glad to have got involved with it, just from any level, but from that level that I think it helped me become a more mature and less selfish and less self-obsessed person. And again, it's all around about that 2008 time when I met my wife, and my life did sort of start. Well, my life not start turning around, it turned around really, and I changed from being, someone who was a bit lost to having a bit more focus and a bit more happiness. So, but yeah, I think you got to, I think it's nice to do things for other people. I think charities are great, and I think it's sort of, I try to concentrate on one or two things rather than sort of spread myself out. I'll do charity gigs if people ask me. And I'll do bits and pieces of a charity, but I decided to get heavily involved with Scope, and then they did make me a patron of Scope, which was I was very flattered and honoured to be. And it's nice with Refuge and Scope, particularly, that I've managed to kind of make some monetary difference, at least, as well, with whatever else I've done. But hopefully raised a bit of awareness of what they're about, and help people be. It's just ignorance, and it's the ignorance that I think we all have, right? And I think that's, I would never want to preach to people and say, I think I'm so great, I understand this. I struggled with all this stuff, and I think we could be a bit more generous generally in life with understanding that people are flawed and make terrible mistakes, and they're idiots, and are capable of overcoming that, and then doing something good at the end of it, and hopefully not just cancel people and shut them down because they make a mistake at some point in their life.
Definitely.
So, I've got a couple more emergency questions. For
okay,
you,
let's do it.
So they're going to be quick fire ones.
Okay.
So, remember that you wrote these. They are a bit weird, but you wrote them. So, do you think Toy Story 2 could ever happen in real life?
I think it could. I've got kids now, and they've got toys, and I think none of the other Toy Stories could happen, but I think Toy Story 2 specifically probably has happened.
Fair enough. What's your worst experience with the delivery company Yodel?
Wow, I'd asked that question because my worst experience was them meant to be delivering a little sand table thing for my kids, and 3 times I think saying that they'd been at the house, and I'd literally been sat by the door of my house the whole time, and they said they posted a card through, and they definitely hadn't, because I was sitting right by the letterbox and by the second one. Them just lying very badly about the fact that they tried to deliver something which they absolutely hadn't tried to deliver, because I'd been watching from the window the whole time.
Yeah, I think we've all had an experience like that. Absolutely the worst. And last quick fire question. If you're going to form a barbershop quartet, what would you call it?
If I was going to form a barbershop quartet, I can only think of the B-sharps from The Simpsons now, which is my favourite bit of The Simpsons, where they say we're going to come up with a name that seems witty at first and gets increasingly less funny every time you hear it. So I'd call myself, and I can only still be the B-sharps. The B-sharps.
Fair enough. No copyright infringements there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
These are unprecedented times, and the physical, mental health and economic impacts may affect us all for some time to come. But do you have hope for the future? Do you think there are positives that can come out of this in the strange time that we are in now?
I do. I'm terrified about the future, and I have hopes for the future. I think things could go either way, in either direction. I think things could go very badly, but I do think ultimately most people are pretty good. I think people can be selfish and can be lazy and can just be like, oh, everything will be all right. And I don't think we're in that position for loads of reasons. I think there's the climate, the political situation, the recession we're going to be in, whatever the effects of Brexit are going to be. We're heading for a bumpy time, but I really hope. I think there's loads of encouraging things. I think especially from your generation, which I'm very hopeful you can do stuff with. I think the stuff that's happening with the Extinction Rebellion is exciting. I think hopefully if your generation can become politically motivated and realize that protesting can make difference to stuff, as I think the A-level stuff did, and hopefully the Black Lives Matter stuff did. I think we can move on. It's going to be difficult. I think we've got a lot of challenges to face, and I think it's not always going to be easy to concentrate on everything that needs to be concentrated on. But I sort of feel history's a bit of a pendulum, and I fear that the pendulum might have to go a bit further to the unpleasant side for us to swing back again. But I think incrementally progress is being made. I think it's very slow in a lot of it, and it's there's a lot of things. I didn't think Nazis were going to become a thing again. I think we sort of sorted out Nazis in 1945. I think we worked out that didn't work out very well. And so it's extremely upsetting that it's even like that sort of right-wing politics is back on any kind of agenda. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens in America. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Brexit. But I think that the pandemic, as much as it's been horrific, and as much as we've lost lots of people and lots of people have been really badly ill, I kind of hope that it has brought an idea of community back, and hopefully healed a few of the divisions in our country at least. I do remain positive and optimistic, because I think there's enough good people and enough. I think ultimately, I think the environment might be a big thing, and I think a lot of the things that are going wrong at the moment are a result of environmental issues as much as man-made issues. Well, I mean, the environment issues are man-made, but and I think we'll be forced to have a rethink about a lot of the things that are seen as being normal. But it will only come if younger people, and really people of my age, because we need to motor it on, start recognizing what the problems are and what needs to be changed. Because I think some of the very older people are maybe not going to change their minds, but I think it's possible to to move things on fairly quickly if enough people get behind it. I did a show called Hitler Moustache, which was about the importance of voting and how I didn't think right-wing politics would really take off in our country ever, and which wasn't right. But the importance of voting is there, so the importance of being politically engaged. And I think things might go so wrong that we make some changes, and maybe the thing with Trump in America is maybe by going against it, and if he loses, and the next people who come in might move things forward as a result of having taken that step, what I consider to be a step backwards, you might get a step forwards as a result that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had the bad thing. And I think with the COVID stuff, if that hadn't happened, we might, the NHS, I think it might give the NHS a chance of surviving, because I think it gets harder and harder to dismantle it, and it's wronger and wronger to dismantle it. And I think when you appreciate that life is that fragile and something can just rip through the world in the way this has, that we do need to stay together, that we do need, you need to understand, even if you're a billionaire, you didn't become a billionaire on your own. You became a billionaire because everyone worked together and made you a billionaire. It's not fair and it's not right. And we need to be, make this society more equal than it is, but maybe by pushing it, if it does go worse, I think it might get better, but that's not very positive because we don't want things to go too bad again. But who knows? I think there'll be lots of good things that come out of it. And there's always, I did it to mention this on a podcast, but there's in Chernobyl, a mushroom started growing on the inside of the reactors that might be able to be capable of protecting spacecraft from radiation. And so there's a terrible thing that's happened, and then something might come out of that enables humanity to survive and go to another planet eventually. That's the way. Sometimes the repercussions of something awful can have an unexpected benefit down the line, which does not mean great, the terrible thing happened, but it means out of whatever bad happens, something may spring up that surprises you. I think the people in control the people in charge are just, then they're taking punts on stuff, and I don't think they've thought through what's going to happen. And I think ultimately it might all blow up in their faces, because I think they'll just push things and get to a point where people go, look, this has gone far enough. And if A levels can do that, then that's not good news for them, because A levels, as important they are to you when you're taking them, are not the most important thing in the world. And so if people can be that politically motivated about something like that, then hopefully, which I'm not saying they're wrong about, they are correct about, then hopefully we can make changes where necessary as well. But it's, the world's an unpleasant place in so many ways, so we can only have hope.
So finally, the big question. We always ask our guests to nominate and ask another celebrity to be a future guest.
Oh,
if you have enjoyed tonight's experience, which we hope you have.
Yes.
Who would you like to nominate tonight? Any comedy friends? Maybe Richard Osman?
I was thinking Richard Osman was who came to mind straight away. He's a great guy. I'm sure he would do it if you asked him. He's very interesting. He's very charming. He's quite rude, but I'm sure he would rein it in for you guys. I've managed to do okay. Nearly swore a couple of times, but I managed to swerve away. And I think Richard would be great. Have you had Sarah Pascoe? Is a fantastic comedian and thinker. She'd be a great person to have on, and I'm sure she would do it. Lots. There's a lot of people. My favorite. Bob Mortimer is one of my favorite guests I've had. I know you'd have fun with him. There's a lot of people really. If I get down to it, Greg Davis from Taskmaster, but good luck getting hold of him. But one I'd say let's go for Richard Osman. Let's get him on.
That you could, get him on would be very appreciated.
I'm sure I could have a word with him. He's got a book out, so he'll do anything to publicise that. That's what we're like.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Well done.
And entertaining us all. We've really loved hearing about your comedy career, podcasting, and all the campaigns you've supported. Good luck with all that comes next, and we look forward to seeing you on Taskmaster in October.
Terrific.
In the meantime, we look forward to listening to more podcasts. Stay safe, send our love to you and your family. Take care, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks very much, Abby. Great job. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's it. Thank you to everyone for tuning in this evening and yet again for being a part of history. Make sure you continue to join us throughout this week as we host our final virtual shows of the summer. And we'll be back on tomorrow when we will be taking part in an Israel-themed quiz before being joined again by the Israeli Dance Institute. We'll then go on another virtual tour before getting involved with more acts of kindness with Stand Up Education. We will then be joined by the man himself, Chief Executive of JLGB, Neil Martin, OBE, who will speak about the future of JLGB and tell us his own story. Until then, keep well and good night.